I've been asked to talk about Occupy London in particular and the role that St Paul's played in that occupation, and also Occupy as a movement, perhaps maybe with reference to the peace movement, which we're looking at this conference. But first off, I think I need to make it absolutely clear. I'm going to say a lot of things about Occupy, and I'm sorry because a lot of you are going to know them and know things maybe a bit more than I do in certain areas, so hopefully we can talk about that in the questioning. But also, Occupy is a completely non-hierarchical movement. I can't speak for Occupy, I can only speak for me and the bits I was at. Occupy decides things at general assemblies, where a bunch of people come together and discuss stuff and decide things using a consensus-based model. The bad thing is that they're chaotic and can take a really long time. But the good thing is they're chaotic and they're really democratic. But one of the limits of Occupy is often that these general assemblies have to happen somewhere. So there's no national general assembly, there's no national way to speak for the whole of Occupy. With C&D, Kate Hudson can just say, yep, C&D think this. Occupy, that's a lot harder to do. Can we have the first slide? Yeah. There's also occupiers everywhere. We saw a really good map earlier. There'll be another map up there in a moment. And all of those occupiers are slightly different. And what is Occupy and what isn't Occupy is really hard to say. I mean, there's Occupy people here. Is this an Occupy event? I mean, you've got an Occupy badge on. Is this an Occupy event? It is, but the organisers might say it's not, and do you know what? They're both right, and that's part of Occupy. I think something that we're used to in the peace movement and the kind of usual organising is that people own things, and this is definitely this and this is definitely that. Occupy, the lines are blurred, and that has some massive strengths and massive weaknesses. Wicked, cool. You'll notice the Israel occupations on that map, Palestine, whatever you want to call it. I believe this map really should be titled After 1000 We Kind of Stop Counting, because it's not very scientific, but Occupy has really happened everywhere, and it's crazy that it got so broad and so big. So where do you start to talk about Occupy? Usually you start a talk with where the movement started, where it came from. But I think Kevin's touched on this a bit. Where did Occupy start? I went to lots of climate camps, and I thought, wow, this is just like climate camp. It's come from climate camp. And other people thought, well, obviously this has been called by UCAN Cut and the Indignados in Spain and Occupy Wall Street, so it's come from them. There's tactics there from groups like Reclaim the Streets. There's tactics there from things like Green and Common. And I think it's really important to realise that Occupy comes from all of these things. And it's just another kind of stage in this kind of broad leftist aching for change that we're all working towards. This is a peace history conference, and I think we're looking here at initially this session was going to be more about Peterloo and comparing it to, and looking at other occupations through history. And initially I was really annoyed with this, because Occupy is a thing. It's something that's happening now. It's you've heard the phrase, you can't evict an idea, and Occupy is an idea whose time is now. And initially I thought, talking about a history of occupation is kind of pointless, because Occupy it's something different from a history of occupation. But when I thought about it more, it does come from all these different groups, and so I'm pleased that it's that we are talking about Occupy with a history of occupation at the same time. I'm pleased, but I'm still annoyed, and just welcome to Occupy. So because we're in the UK, I think I'm going to start on October 15th, 2011, when a bunch of people, mainly the Indignados in Spain and the Occupy Wall Street lot, called, come on people, let's go occupy everything. I'm part of a in my spare time, I'm part of a group called the Green and Black Cross. We're a national legal support group. There's a little group up here in Manchester, but I'm obviously mainly involved in the London one. When a bunch of people say they want to occupy the private land owned by the stock exchange, we start thinking, you might need some legal support. So we get some... has anyone seen these people in the orange bibs about ever on a demonstration? They're called legal observers, and they kind of monitor the police and inform people about their rights. So we got a bunch of them together and went down on the 15th. I wasn't actually there, but a bunch of the people from my crew went down. We made the right call being there because there were police in riot gear everywhere. It was as if something, perhaps some of the previous occupations, this is Plaza del Sol in Madrid, and if you think this is big, this is an approach street. Yeah? I mean, they were getting things like 500,000 people reasonably regularly down. General assemblies, if you thought the ones in London were big, they were getting 10,000 people to a general assembly every week. Yeah? So they were worried about Occupy, and I think this is something that people, internationally people looked at Occupy, and the police forces and the forces of the state had kind of decided that perhaps it wasn't such a good idea to let it get a foot in the door. The policing got worse throughout the day, and this is, I think, a real crunch moment for Occupy in the UK. And I think we underestimate how important this was. This is the steps of St Paul's, because obviously there was an injunction on the land outside the stock exchange, so Occupy the stock exchange ended up just outside. And these people in the blue hats along the top, they're the territorial support group, who are Britain's most violent police unit. Something they're probably proud of. They came there to protect the cathedral and to stop it getting damaged, apparently. For me, as someone that spends far too much time than is healthy looking at what the police are doing, that's a manoeuvre that you do to begin to clear the steps and to begin to get people out of there. They'd already not kettled Occupy London for hours. You couldn't leave. You were surrounded by cops. It wasn't a kettle, though. And then someone called Giles Fraser came out of the cathedral. And he said he was happy for people to exercise their right to protest peacefully in front of the cathedral. And he said that to the police, and he said that to the Occupy people, and he said it crucially to lots of media. And, I don't know for sure if the police were going to clear the area. But this was something that was beginning to happen as night fell. You can see it beginning to get dark there. And, I was there on the second day of Occupant la Défense, the Occupy in Paris. And when night fell there, the CRS, who are the French riot police, came and they took everything that could be used to live in. In October, November, you need some shelter, and people did stay overnight, but it killed it. It totally killed Occupant la Défense, and Occupy in Paris was not nearly as big. And I think Occupy in the UK owes more of a debt to Giles Fraser for his actions on that day than we realise. So, who wants some cool stuff about Occupant la Défense? They did this really cool thing. The police were taking all their stuff, and if you turned up with any cardboard bigger than kind of that, they'd nick it. So this is La Défense, the big arch, and they've made this lovely heart shape, and kind of all the riot police are surrounding it in case they run off. But I think it really illustrates the kind of juxtaposition of what the police are doing into what Occupy are trying to do. And now a really terrible photo, really low resolution. This is Occupant la Défense in the third week, and they've made some kind of literally stuff out of cardboard. And if any of these structures got too big, they'd be nabbed. They'd probably go every night or every other night. But what they've done that's really cool is, if you can see around the bottom, it's incredibly blurred, I'm sorry, but they've put lots of cardboard on the ground, and they've just written their messages for another world as possible, and they just invite people to write it. And with dwindling numbers, it created this really, really good use of space. It really boosted them. And my favourite thing that they did was the police were nicking all the big bits of anything you could live in. So they made these kind of hexagon type shapes, and they smuggled them all in under their coats one by one, and then made this dome that they could live in. There's another picture of it, and then of course the police came and nicked it. But it was really great to see all those creative ways and different ways of trying to kind of get around this, what was happening to them. Okay, so that's a bit about Occupy starting in London. I've been asked to talk about Occupy as a movement, and the first thing to say is, boy, what a movement. They really got that they were a movement from the very beginning. I remember week one, the terrified faces of people in Quaker Peace and Social Witness as we started to get emails and invites from Occupy to come and get involved. You know, they realised we were doing peace stuff. They wanted to reach out to the peace movement. Other peace groups in London were getting these emails as well. It was great because this email bounced around our office, kind of people passing on to other people. We can't ignore Occupy, it's huge, it's just happening, but what do we do? And it got to me and Steve Whiting, who does non-violent direct action training, who's sitting opposite me, and we just thought, yes, awesome, let's go. And I think 2 days later we ran a workshop on non-violent direct action and kind of potentially resisting evictions there, which was really, really cool. I think going back to the way Occupy isn't as defined, Kevin touched on this as well, that the goals of Occupy aren't defined. And without kind of being too academic, I think it's important to realise that you don't have to have a solution to shout that there's a problem. And that's something that was common to Occupy. And also, I'm really pleased class has been mentioned already, because Occupy had a lot of people there of different classes, and I remember talking to some people there, and they got that there was a problem here. But you try talking to them about tax avoidance, and they haven't been to university, and they live very different lives to the majority of people in this room, and they struggle to engage with it at the level that kind of Kevin manages to dissect things at. And it's really important that they're allowed to come and say there's a problem, without having to kind of, right, what's your 12-point plan for fixing the planet? And also, it's Occupy is the tactics that are in common probably go down to occupying stuff. After that, there's people there that do direct actions. There's people there that do protests, there's people who do walking tours, workshops, cooking, counselling. Really interesting, really good mention of, in the States, a medical tent, because there, to have free healthcare is a radical thing in itself. Counselling, praying, whatever it is, but different tactics, and it's all Occupy. But it's also really important that we touch on the negative here, because Occupy had its fair share of problems, and still has its fair share of problems. It's open to everyone, and in London, that meant a lot of people that have been spat out by the broken system that Occupy is protesting against came along. And that was beautiful, and that was awesome, but there's problems with that too. People who are homeless, people who had mental health issues, who had drinking drugs addictions. I remember getting desperate emails from people saying, we need people with experience in counselling, because half of London's homeless population were living in St Paul's. And that was brilliant. They were living somewhere social, they were getting more care than they'd ever got from the state. But that was a real problem. And a lot of people who are used to, for instance, a lot of people fresh out of university don't have a job. A lot of them were at university, Occupy for obvious reasons. They're used to kind of bunch of people studying for PhDs going bang, 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 okay, brilliant, let's do that, done. Everyone gets it really quickly. And at these Occupy meetings, people weren't equipped to taking some of their concepts, some of their ideas. People took it much longer. I know a lot of people that left just because they were frustrated that Occupy took a long time. And that's one of the problems with real, cross-class organisation. Cool. Well, in that case, I'm going to push on. Occupy's not perfect, but neither is life. But one thing Occupy is 100% global. this is Tahrir Square, and I ended up at the G20 in Nice, and my partner dragged me into this meeting of the first meeting of the Mediterranean movement. I thought, what on earth is that? I'll bring a book. Turned out it was the first meeting of people from occupying the States, the Indignados from Spain, people from the Arab Spring. I hadn't thought that people in the Arab Spring were part of Occupy. Turns out they thought they were, so they were. This is a lovely sign up in Westminster, up in St Paul's. I think, and also, where did it start? Because we were saying, brilliant. Well, if you got in here first, if the Tahrir Square is part of Occupy, then you started it. And they went, no. The student protests in London were brilliant. We loved them. When Charles and Camilla's car got attacked, some of them really liked that. So, they have different opinions again. So anyway, bringing to a close, how Occupy ended in London, or the St Paul's site ended in London. Only weeks after, so this is a map of the site, and this site, at the top here, you've got, this is where the corporation was. This land is where the stock exchange opened, there's an injunction. This land is owned by the Corporation of London, it's a public right of way, but this land here is owned by St Paul's Cathedral. And they had a real problem, because they can't just start evicting. The corporation needed St Paul's to be part of the eviction, or Occupy London would just move straight across. So they started eviction processes together. And that outraged a lot of people, Jesus threw the money changers out the temple, and here are St Paul's backing the money changers to the hill. On top of that, St Paul was a tent maker, and you have a fairly ironic situation with lots of angry Christians. So there's so much Quaker support from Occupy. Literally from day one, we're getting emails from Quakers all around the country. Well done if you sent any, saying you've got to get involved in this. So me and my friend Michael started a Quaker meeting, which is basically starting a church like this one here at Occupy, and we got kind of 100 people the first time, which was more than any of the other Quaker meetings in London. And people really liked it, and after that, kind of the centrally managed people got together and they made a statement supporting Occupy, and so did other churches. And there was this really cool sermon on the steps. This is some Sikh guys speaking, and there were anarchists, humanists, Muslims, all of that coming together, and it was the best church service I've ever been to. And they put lots of pressure on St Paul's to drop out of this, of these eviction proceedings. Eventually, they did. But a lot of that, again, was down to Giles Fraser, resigning and saying publicly how he was uncomfortable with this. But we need to be clear here that they didn't pull out of these eviction proceedings because they felt it was the right thing to do. They did it because of public pressure. And the Dean of St Paul's resigned because he felt evicting them was the right thing to do. So eventually the Corporation of London started up legal proceedings again. And when eventually they won, we'd said in the initial things that if Occupy London was to be evicted, my friend Simon Hill said, if Occupy London was to be evicted, we'd form a Christian ring of prayer, and Christians would surround Occupy and pray. And as a kind of one-off comment, but it ended up on the front page of The Independent. So when the eviction came, we really had to do it. We got 300 people signed up online for an email list to email them as soon as the eviction came, including 30 clergy, which was awesome. But what the police did is they came in with 50 vans and just cut off the whole site. 5 minutes, you could no longer get in or out. It was fairly competent for a change. But I was in there with a bunch of other Christians, and we were waiting for this eviction because we thought they might do something like this. We watched the eviction. This is a great photo. It's banks control our government. We have to take it back, and it's some bailiff seizing the sign, which I think is deeply, deeply ironic. And eventually they came and they cleared, after hours and hours, early in the morning, they cleared the Corporation of London site, and we thought, this is Corporation of London proceedings. We'll be fine. We've been praying on the steps of St Paul's. We'll stay here. But then the police came and started clearing the steps of St Paul's, which we thought, you can't do this. There hasn't been eviction proceedings here. and we were praying, and a bunch of us got carried away. And this photo ended up in the Times and the Tory Graph, and I've never been so grateful to work where I work, because I came in at kind of noon, because I'd been up till 5 in the morning with this eviction, and it'd gone around the whole of Friend's House, London, and I didn't even get to reception before kind of the reception was going, well done, and the senior management team came over and said, take the afternoon off, you must be knackered. We were really, really supportive. But just to summarise this,
I want to stop you.
we asked St Paul's, did they give the police permission to clear the steps? And they said no, they gave permission for the steps to be cleaned, but that was it. We thought, okay, fair enough. The police then have acted illegally, not the first time. But to the police's credit, they hadn't. Green London Assembly member Jenny Jones also wrote to the City of London Police, who were running the organisation, and they wrote back and said the police, St Paul's had given the police permission to clear the steps. So St Paul's had not only done exactly what the Corporation of London had done, they'd lied about doing it. And kind of as that just shocked me that a church could do that. For me, Occupy London was the best opportunity for the Church of England in decades to show its relevance. Yeah, and they've absolutely thrown it away, and they've shown what a kind of establishment thing they are. I went on St Paul's website today. This is their corporate partners page. Yeah, still, now, over a year after Occupy started, the London Stock Exchange is listed as a corporate partner. There's some phrase in the Bible about not being able to serve God and mammon. Well, I'm sorry, but I can't think of a better example than this. So just to wrap up, Occupy is so exciting, and it shook out the roots of evil in a way that's better than anything I've ever been involved in. It's a worthy successor to Climate Camp and to Green and Common and to everything else that's coming. But from the very beginning of Occupy, I felt that it's the next idea that's going to change things. Occupy is already changing. In 2011 we had the student stuff, and that transformed into Occupy, and we've tracked these ideas around the world. And for me, what I'm really excited in, as a peace history conference, I'm excited about the next bit of history. I think we'll look back on Occupy as something that, I really hope we look back on Occupy as something that was, John the Baptist, the thing that came just before the thing that really shook everything up. Thank you.